Michael Grunwald, what's the biggest thing America is missing about President Obama's $800 billion stimulus program?
Well, I think people are starting to understand that it did prevent a depression, that it immediately created the biggest improvement in employment numbers in 30 years when we had been crashing at an 8.9% annual rate. What I think people don't realize is the extent to which it's really the purest distillation of what Obama meant by change. He had all these campaign promises that people didn't pay attention to because they were interested in his race and his pastor. But then he comes out and here there's $90 billion for clean energy. There's the biggest education reforms in decades. He laid the groundwork for healthcare reform, the biggest infrastructure investment since Eisenhower, the biggest middle-class tax cuts since Reagan. So I think the idea that it really is a New Deal is something that people don't understand.
But why are they missing it? Is he just not explaining it well enough? He's a very good orator.
Well, right. I always try to remind people that this black guy whose middle name is Hussein and got himself elected president probably didn't become this complete political idiot on January 20th, 2009. Part of this is just, this was a jobs bill that passed at a time when jobs were hemorrhaging. And I think it was counterintuitive for people that at a time when families and businesses were tightening their belt, the government was spending $800 billion of borrowed money and jobs were still disappearing. At the same time, you had Republicans who made this sound like it was $800 billion worth of levitating trains to Disneyland and mob museums and other nonsense that's not in the bill. You had Democrats who didn't really want to defend it. They'd say, oh, it's too small or too many tax cuts. Obama had some real trouble trying to figure out what the message was, and then after losing the message battle over the stimulus, he was on to health care and the auto bailout. And finally, you had the media, which really messed up the story of the stimulus as badly as they messed up the run-up to the war in Iraq.
Well, did we get what we paid for? I think, does it all come down to that? We spent $800 billion, and it's hard for people to actually see it change their lives every day. Did we get what we paid for?
I think we did. Again, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month when this thing passed. Immediately poured money into the economy through aid to states that saved hundreds of thousands of jobs. Through these tax cuts that went to more than 95% of the country, even though less than 10% of the country noticed it, through aid to victims of the Great Recession that kept 7 million people out of poverty. And you did, just about every independent economist who's looked at this would say that it added 2 to 4% to GDP, which is the difference between contraction and growth. And then on the long-term reinvestment stuff, you've seen renewables doubled. We've got an entirely new battery industry for electric vehicles. We're starting high-speed rail. We're starting race to the top in education, health IT so that your doctor won't kill you with his chicken scratch handwriting. This stuff is really happening.
Also, what happened was money went to things like Solyndra. Now, you say
Right.
there was less waste in this program than a lot of people point out. Can you convince me of that?
Sure. Well, the best person to convince you is a guy named Earl Devaney, who is probably the toughest investigator in Washington and was put in charge of overseeing this thing. He's the guy who broke the Jack Abramoff lobbying scandal. He caught those oil regulators who were sleeping with oil executives during the Bush administration. He was put in charge of this. The fraud experts said that you could expect 5 to 7% of this to be stolen, essentially. And Devaney, so far, they've found 0.001%. He says he's been flabbergasted, that it's unbelievably clean. And it's because this is the most transparent and accountable money that the federal government has ever spent. What Devaney says is you'd have to be an idiot to steal this money. Go steal some other money.